over the world. Today we are talking about dependent visas, which is a topic that we know is dear to everybody's heart. And we are here today to answer some of your most commonly asked questions. So my name is Trudy Winterflood. I'm the Marketing Director here at Drake Medox UK, and I'm your host for the day. Just before we get started any further, we've got a few housekeeping matters. Please listen attentively and take notes if you wish. Feel free to ask questions at any time in the comments section. We have a few experts on hand that will be there to answer your questions as we go through, and then we will also hold a short live Q&A session at the end. Now, it might not be possible to answer everyone's questions during the event, but we will provide a full list of answers to your questions, including the website links that we will be referring to during the presentation via an email that we will be sending out to you afterwards. Now, I'd just like to quickly say a big thank you to Jev, who is going to be managing our slides. So, Jev, thank you for putting us onto the next slide already today. So before we go any further, as I say, this is a very key topic. Everyone is very interested in it, understandably, because it's about our loved ones, and we're all wanting to do the very best for them. Now, we are aware that we've had, due to this huge number of interest, people from around the world who are registered today. I just want to say that there is a WHO, World Health Organization, workforce support and safeguard list, and that prescribes a list of countries that we and any ethical agency is not permitted to actively recruit from. Now, the good news for you, if you are from one of those countries on what they call the red list, you can still apply directly to UK employers and NHS trusts. There's a QR code there that you can scan, or again, we'll be sharing the link later, which has a little bit more advice on how you can do that, where you can apply, and some tips for applying. But please be aware that unfortunately, we will not be able to accept or process any applications if you are on that list. One other key thing to note is that the red list is based on your country of residence, not nationality. So if you are from a red list country, but you're currently living and working, and that's key, it must be working as well, in another country that is a green list country, then we are able to accept your applications. Again, the QR code there and the link we will share with you afterwards will give you some more information and tips around that. Right, but without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Liz Miller, who is our operations manager here at Drake Medox UK and an absolute expert in the field. We're very happy to have you here this morning, Liz.
Thanks, Trudy. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the globe. It's great to have so many of you join us, and I think the numbers are indicative of how important this topic is for nurses and other healthcare professionals, anyone, in fact, looking to come to work in the UK from somewhere overseas. We fully appreciate how much of a sacrifice you're all making in choosing to leave your home, leaving your family, leaving friends, your network, support network, and everything that you're familiar with for pastures new opportunities in a completely different part of the world. So it's a massive step for you all, and we never take that lightly. We often, some of the first questions that we get asked by candidates who are looking to come to the UK is about whether or not their family can join them. And the great thing about the UK is that you can have your family join you. There are lots of countries where nurses and other healthcare professionals go to work where they're not allowed to bring their families, and certainly not easily. So that's one big bonus for working in the UK, is that you can have your family with you from day one if you wish, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I must stress just before we start, I'm not an immigration lawyer. I do have what's called OISC, that's the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner in the UK. I have accreditation with them at level 1 only, which is for entry clearance visas. So as I say, I'm not an immigration lawyer, but I can give, sort of basic generic advice. The advice that we're going to give you today is based pretty much on our extensive experience in international healthcare recruitment. We've been doing this for 2 decades or more now. And so, as you can imagine, this is our, this is our regular day-to-day experience that we're passing on here. And we don't get involved necessarily in the physical application for a dependent visa, but we can definitely point you in the right direction for all the help that you will need and guidance that you can get online. And we're here to answer questions. If we can answer them, we certainly will. If we don't know the answer, we will tell you that we don't know the answer, but we will go away and try and find the information for you. So you'll get an honest appraisal and response from us at all times, which I think is key. Lots of immigration advisors immigration lawyers will charge you lots of money to tell you things that you can easily find out online. So just beware of that. But I would caution that if you do have any sort of specifically tricky circumstances, for example, if you've been to not just the UK but any country before and you have for some reason overstayed your visa period, then that might be a reason to sort of check with some get some immigration advice, just to make sure that that's not going to impact your visa application to the UK in any way. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say for now, so let's go on with the presentation. Thanks, Jeff. So the first question, first question usually is, who can you bring? So legally you are entitled to bring your spouse or partner. Your spouse or partner can be a husband, wife, civil partner, or unmarried partner. The point that you'll have to be aware of is when you go to make your visa application, if you're married, then obviously you'll be providing a marriage certificate. If you're not married, you need to have been living together with your partner for 2 years as a minimum, and you need to evidence that you've been living together in that relationship for that period of time. So documents such as utility bills or rental agreements in both your names, that sort of thing. Sometimes that's quite tricky to get around, but we will advise you on what we can put into a cover letter, for example, to explain the circumstances. So I can tell you that we've had this situation before where some people aren't married to their partners and it hasn't caused an issue, but we just need to be clear that when you put your application in, that you make it that you provide as much supporting evidence as possible. Okay, so husbands, wives, partners, and unmarried partners, that's the first one. Next slide, please, Jeff. Children. For those of you who do have children, the children must be under the age of 18, otherwise they're not eligible, unfortunately. And if any of your children are 16 or over, there are some criteria to be aware of. So as it says there on the slide, they must live with you currently, unless they're in full-time education at university, they're living away from home, for example, that can be evidenced. They can't be married. I'm not saying that many of you will have married children at the age of 16 or over, but it happens and it might be a consideration, and they can't have any children of their own, and they must be financially supported by you. If they're financially independent, then they're not considered as dependent on you and therefore don't meet the criteria for a dependent visa. Okay, next slide, please, Jeff. So the following exceptions may be considered for children over 18. So for example, if you're a single parent family, whether you've been widowed or whether you're divorced possibly, or whether there was never a partnership in place at the time after you had your child, those sorts of things again can be supported with evidence to show that you are very much solely responsible for the maintenance of that dependent. So financially, physically, emotionally, in every way. You have to think of it that you have to remember that your paperwork is going in front of a faceless person at the British Embassy who doesn't know you, who doesn't have any agenda other than to check whether you meet the criteria. So it's a tick box exercise for them in some ways. So the more information that you can give them upfront in a cover letter, in lots of documentation, photos, all sorts of things that you can add to prove why or evidence why your case should be considered to bring your child who's over 18 or whatever the circumstance may be. It'll make their job easier, and it will mean that they don't have to refer back to you for more information. Okay, but these are, they're not usual circumstances, but obviously there are exceptions to the, the normal family unit sort of thing. But we can get over that. We can get through those with making sure that we give enough information, supporting information. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Next slide. So what are your dependents entitled to? What are they eligible for? So when you apply for their visas, they will get the same validity period as you have. So if you have been sponsored by your employer for 3 years, which is standard, then their leave to remain in the UK will be for 3 years too. Your partner or children, once they get to the age, can work without restrictions, other than, I think that the only exceptions are that they can't be studying to be a doctor or a dentist, or training to be a doctor or a dentist, or a sports person. Random choice, but there we are. That's you're not allowed to do those. Any other job in the world they can take up in the UK. Your children will have free education up to the age of 18. So that includes nursery education from the age of 3. So in the UK, you can take your children to private nurseries, but obviously you'll pay for that. But there you get free nursery education, or you get vouchers for free nursery education from the age of 3. They start primary school at the age of 5, and that goes through till the age of 12 or 11. And then from 12 to 16, they're in what we call secondary school, you might call high school. And then they can go to college up to the age of 18. 18 is the age at which they would go to university, and that's when the free education finishes, I'm afraid. We all have to pay for that. I'm still paying for my sons 20 years later. So, but that, you can get information on that. But otherwise, you've got free education for your children. Your partner could study or take a postgrad course if that was applicable, and obviously your children as well when it comes to that. They can extend their visa along with yours. So when you get to the end of your 3-year initial sponsorship period, you hopefully will want to stay in the UK, and you will then have to extend your visa. So you will apply for their visa extensions at the same time or later, depending on when their 3 years ends. And then you can all apply for indefinite leave to remain once you've all been in the UK for at least 5 years. The only thing that you won't be able to do is claim benefits or have access to public funds. So, for example, you can't claim child benefit, which UK nationals get. You can't claim unemployment benefit, those sorts of things. But that's the only restriction. Next slide, please, Jeff. So another big question, when can you bring your dependents? We get lots of nurses wanting to bring their families with them when they arrive, first of all, in the UK, and completely understand that. I would too, I guess. However, start legally. They can come with you when you land in the UK. That's fine. Okay, that's your spouse or partner or your children. If your spouse or partner comes with you at the time of deployment, then you can bring your children over at a later date. If you come on your own, you can't bring your children without your partner, unless you're a single parent, of course. And the reason for that is because they want to make sure that you're able to support that child. If you're in the UK working full time and you have no support here, then how will you arrange, childcare and, making sure that your child is safe when you're here? So that's the sort of scenario. Generally speaking, nurses that we work with, nurses and allied health professionals, will either bring all of their family together at once in the beginning, or they will wait and bring them all over at a later stage. And we'll come on to now our recommendation. Next slide, please, Jeff. Right, so when do we recommend you bring your dependents? Now, some nurses, or candidates that we speak to don't like this advice because obviously it's going against what they would ideally like to do. But I promise you, this is all for your benefit. This is, us keeping you safe and secure and making sure that your family are safe and secure when they arrive. It's really important that you appreciate and understand the amount of change and all of the things that you have to deal with when you get to the UK. Most of you have never been here before. Some of you will have never moved outside your country before. So this is a big life-changing step. And I don't think that, can be taken too lightly by any of us. So we recommend that because of that and for financial reasons, that you come first with your cohorts. You'll be getting a new family with the other nurses and allied health professionals that you'll be deployed with. You will be provided with accommodation by your employer for a period of time. It could be 1 month, it could be 3 months, it could be longer. The free period is variable, and it depends on which employer you are coming to work with, but usually it's between 1 and 3 months free rental period, and after that you are responsible for paying the rent for your property. Most of the NHS trusts that we work with have on-site accommodation, but they are for single occupancy only. So the accommodation that you are given on arrival is just for you. There's no room for anybody else, and it's not allowed to have families stay in those accommodations. It is not possible to, legally anyway, to rent accommodation before you get to the UK. So you could start looking online at accommodation for rent in the UK, but you won't be able to legally sign a rental agreement until you are in the UK, and the landlord or the agents will be able to conduct a right to rent check, which is a legal requirement. So the only way that some candidates have got around that is to rent an Airbnb apartment, for example, but that's expensive, difficult to find, you know, in the right timeframes, etc. So all of these things start to complicate your initial period in the UK, and it's really important for you that you give your time to yourself time to settle, to acclimatize. You know, you're getting used to new surroundings, new people, new accents, new food, new weather, all sorts of things. It's going to be very different from where you come from. And that, as I say, you need to consider that for yourself. So that will distract you from, you know, the time that you have with your family, from the focus that you can give your family. So in my opinion, certainly, I would rather leave my children in a place where they're safe and secure and familiar. And yes, they're going to miss you for a little while, but they're with their, you know, they might be with their other parent or wider family. Lots of the nurses that we work with come from countries where living with extended family is the norm. So that part of, you know, the transition it won't be so difficult for the children. I think sometimes our need to have our family come with us is more for us than them. And I completely understand that as a mum myself. So I do understand. But for all those reasons, you've got to get through your OSCE first, and OSCE prep time takes is varied between employers. So you could be preparing for your OSCE for a month, and it could be 2 months. You may not pass the first time. Obviously, that would be great if you do, but if you don't, you still need time to, you know, process that and get prepared for your retake. So all of that is very time consuming, energy consuming, and, you know, if you give yourself a couple of months, 2-3 months before you then think about bringing your family over, I think you will eventually see the benefit. And when we talk to nurses now who insisted on bringing their families, they can relate to the fact that it was, you know, a little bit stressful, and that they wish they had waited and brought them, say, a few months down the line. The other thing about waiting is that once you've passed your OSCE and you've got your registration, then you're on to the higher post-registration salary. So more money in your pocket, more money to be able to rent a place with. You know, how lovely to welcome your family at the airport and take them to the home that will be theirs for the next year or two or whatever it might be. Different to welcoming them at the airport and then ending up in a hotel or an Airbnb. You know, it's not the same security for any of you. So those are all the reasons why we would recommend that you defer bringing your dependents to the UK until you have, you know, got through that initial couple of months. The other thing to consider is that when you sign an agreement, a rental agreement, they're usually from minimum is 6 months, but the usual period is 12 months minimum. So again, you've got to commit to that place and be able to afford it. And you've got to think about where it is in proximity to schools, perhaps your commute to work, etc. So this is a big topic, and I could talk about that for a lot longer. I won't, but you get the picture. It's not. It's something that you should definitely consider. We wouldn't stop you from bringing your family at the same time as yourself, but these are all the very good reasons why we would recommend that you didn't. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Let's move on. Okay, the visa application process itself. So for your visa, you will get step-by-step help from whichever one of our partners or us directly that you work with, depending on where you are in the world. It's a very straightforward visa application for the skilled worker visa, the health and care visa. It's a standard set of documentation. You've met all the criteria before we send you for the appointment, so we know that there's very little chance of anything being refused. With the dependent visa applications, it's slightly different. Obviously, costly because there are, as I've talked about, different pieces of evidence that you have to provide. You might have multiple dependents to bring. You know, you could have a family of 5, a husband, wife, and 3 children, for example. So everything has to be done per dependent. So you've got, you know, more than one application to complete. You've got more than one payment. You've got more than one biometric appointment. So it's quite well, I don't want to use as stressful, but it can be actually. But it's a process that you have to follow, and it's fine if you just follow the steps and take all the guidance that you can get online from the UK government website. And we will give you some advice, but it's not, unfortunately, our responsibility to apply for your dependent visas. You will have to do that independently. So you complete the form online, which is a simple, you know, it's quite a long form, but they're standard questions. They're not difficult to answer. They're not looking to trick you or trip you up. They're just looking to you to evidence the relationship between you and your family. So you would have to provide things like marriage certificates, birth certificates. You need to upload certain mandatory documents. So all of the passports, TB certificates for some countries, depending on where you're coming from, police clearance certificates, all of those sorts of things. With regards to evidence of financial support, I'm going to come on to that separately later because there are 2 ways to meet that criteria. So again, all of the information, and there is copious amounts of information online. We will send you the links to the best points of advice for you, so you can look at those, and then you might want to read up on that and then come back to us with some questions. That's perfectly fine. Okay, thanks, Jeff. So the mandatory documents, as I mentioned, so your current passport plus expired passports if it's needed to show travel history. Marriage license, if applicable, proof of knowledge of English. It's not, your children don't have to take an English language test, but your partner will do. The most common is the 𝗃𝗴𝗴𝗁. So there's other IELTS, there's academic IELTS, there's general IELTS. They're needed for registration purposes for your working visa. But for the dependents visa, it's just 𝗃𝗴𝗴𝗁 is the most common one. There are others, and again, we'll send you a link to the list of acceptable tests. They only have to get a level 4 though, which is pretty much half of what you have to get for your registration. So it's really quite easy. Proof of financial maintenance, again, we'll come on to that shortly. TB test results, if you come from one of the listed countries or you have lived in one of those listed countries within the last 10 years, then you will have to get, sorry, within the last 12 months, that's a typo, my error, sorry. Within the last 12 months, then you will have to get a TB certificate from IOM, which is the Immigration Office of Migration, something like that. And then police clearance certificates, that's for any country where you're currently living and for any country where you have resided for 12 months or more in the last 10 years. Again, only applies to dependents aged 18 or over. So you don't need a police clearance certificate for your children, obviously. Okay, next slide, please, Jeff. Right, costs. Nobody likes this bit. So a standard visa cost is £247. And they take up to 15 working days. That's the standard route, approximately. No guarantees, but that is the stated timelines. You can, if you wish, to pay an additional priority processing fee, which costs an extra £250, and that, in theory, can take only 3 to 5 working days. Again, not guaranteed. And if for some reason they have questions and they need to come back to you, they will email you and ask you for some additional information. And then obviously that timeline goes out the window. It'll take as long as it takes. All fees are payable in your local currency or US dollars. And when you go into the portal, it will tell you which currency they accept. The great news is that because you'll all be coming on a health and care worker visa, you and your dependents are exempt from the cost of immigration health surcharge, which, believe me, is expensive. So you have access, because you're working for our healthcare system, you quite rightly have access to free healthcare for you and your dependents. When you might see us refer to main applicant, that's you. And then the initial dependent visa is valid for the same period as yours will be. Okay, next slide, please, Jeff. Hope you haven't all fallen asleep yet. Right, this is the tricky part, proof of financial maintenance. So there are 2 ways to meet this criteria. For your own visa, because you are being sponsored by your employer, they agree to what's called certified maintenance. What that effectively means is that they are committing to supporting you financially for the first 30 days of your arrival. And they do this by providing you with accommodation, paying your salary. You know, you don't have to have money to come to the UK on that basis. Obviously, it's ideal that you bring some money with you. You will be getting a cash advance, generally speaking, with most of our employers that will help. There are several refunds that are being made to you when you arrive. That's all part of the standard worker visa package. Sorry, the employment package for each of our clients. However, when your employer ticks that box that says certified maintenance, it is automatically assumed that they're certified maintenance for you and your dependents. Some employers are fine with that, and they don't put any caveat on that. Other employers are not able to commit to certified maintenance for your dependents as well. So they will put a note on your certificate of sponsorship to say that they're certified maintenance only for their sponsored worker. If they do allow, or if they do leave the box ticked and they don't put any caveat, it doesn't mean that they're going to give you a lump of money to then spend on your visa application. The visa application fees are still your responsibility, as are all of the other fees that you have to pay to lead up to that point for your applications. It also doesn't mean that they will give you a sum of money on arrival. It's a way of providing you with the luxury, if you like, of not having to show available funds in your bank account. So it's very difficult to explain this on a sort of forum like this. And if you've got individual questions about this, don't worry, we will go through it clearly with you. But we're trying to speak to or get back to all of our clients currently, our employer clients, to ask them if they are happy to certify maintenance for dependents as well. But there is, you know, legally speaking, there is a commitment there for them, which they may not be able to take on. So the other way, if your employer is not prepared to certify maintenance for your dependents, then you must be able to show available funds in your bank account or any one of your family's bank account, yours or your partner's, for example, that you can support your family for the first month as a minimum. So they have set levels of funding. Jeff, could you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so the funds that you'll be required to show, and you will only have to provide a bank statement that shows that you've had this money in your account for at least 28 days in a row. And those 28 days must be within the last month, within the last 31 days before you apply for the visa. So it's £285 for your partner, £315 for one child, and then £200 for each additional child. So as an example, we've put there on the slide, if you would bring a partner and one child, you would need to show £600 in your account for 28 days in a row. If you had a partner and two children, for example, it would be £800. So the calculation you can see is pretty straightforward. Because you only have to show that money in the account for 28 days, nobody's going to be looking back for the last 6 months, for example. So, you know, it doesn't mean to say that you have to have that money in there for months in advance. It's just that 28 days. And you would have to provide original bank statements for that. Okay, so I think that part of it is clear. The certified maintenance might have confused you a little bit, and we're happy to take more questions on that later. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Sorry, getting a bit dry. Okay, visa extension. After your initial 3-year period, and I say 3 years because that's the general period of sponsorship that certainly the employers that we work with offer to all of their overseas healthcare professionals. We have one client who offers a 5-year sponsorship, which is very handy. Might not be the good part is then you wouldn't have the cost of a visa extension after 3 years, so that's the benefit. But some people don't want to be tied into an employer for you know, that period of time. They might prefer to sign up for the 3 years and then make their decisions after that. So generally speaking, most employers offer a 3-year sponsorship. So after 3 years, you can apply for a visa extension for a further 2 years, which will take you up to 5 years in total in the UK. You can apply for longer than that, but I don't know why you would, because after 5 years you can apply for indefinite leave to remain, and that, you know, secures your or makes your stay in the UK much easier, less restrictive, and leads on to eventually citizenship if you were to take that opportunity. So after 5 years, you can apply for residency, and it's called indefinite leave to remain. So much fewer restrictions on you. Everything else still applies. You're still a visa national during that period, but that will apply to you and your family. To apply for indefinite leave to remain, all dependents over the age of 18 must take the Life in the UK test. I've had some experience of this. I wouldn't call it Life in the UK test. It's a funny title for the sorts of questions you get asked. It could be anything from you know, it's questions about TV programs to history to food to culture. You know, it's some of the questions are a bit strange, but it's not a difficult test to pass, but you do have to study for it. But that only applies to children and your partners over the age of 18. After 6 years, you can apply for citizenship and then go on to get a British passport. Happy days. The cost of that further leave to remain will be £479 for the main applicant and £1,048 per dependent. So not cheap, but you've got 3 years to start saving up for that. And there are some of our employers as well. Some of your employers will pay for your visa extension, or may advance that cost for you and then reclaim it over a period of time. But they won't be able to sponsor the same amount for your dependents. So you will definitely have to have that money available to pay for your further leave to remain applications for your family. And of course, prices aren't fixed, so they could increase by the time you're in a position to be able to do that. ILR, indefinite leave to remain, is £2,400 per dependent. So again, not cheap, but it secures your future in the UK. Okay, next slide, please, Jeff. So tips for success. Generally speaking, it's fairly obvious. You know, you have to make sure that your application is as accurate and correct as it can be when it's submitted. As I said before, your job is to make sure that the assessment officer looking at your particular application is not going to have to scour the pages looking for answers that he needs and then have to waste time coming back to you for additional information. So the more that you can provide at the beginning, the better chance you have of getting a first time approval. Make sure that all the documents that you scan and upload are clear and legible. There's very clear guidance on the format of the documents, you know, whether it's PDF or JPEG or whatever it might be. You know, make sure they're in good light. You know, we see, like, people obviously take photos of things on their cameras and that you can see their hand around the certificate. You know, you've got to sort of make sure that it's as clear as it possibly can be. Check the validity period of the certificates that you're uploading. So your TB certificate, your English language certificate, police clearances, depending on which country you're coming from, they are valid for different periods of time. Some are 6 months, some are a year, some are 2 years. So make sure that they're all valid at the time you submit to the embassy. Make sure that you've gone through your application more than once to make sure that you've made no errors, no typos, etc. You might have, you know, it's easy to miss, you know, make a mistake on a date of birth, for example, just with a typo. So make sure that that's accurate. Make sure that you're sure of the types of evidence that you need to provide and that you have all of that to hand when you're making your application online. And then you will go for your biometric appointment once you've made your visa application, with or without your family. And they take your fingerprints, take your photo, and make sure that your application is in order. And that's it. Once you've submitted, you can't change it. Okay, so, you know, do not press that submit button until you're sure that you've got everything ready. Okay, thanks, Jeff. So why choose the UK? Well, this is, you know, as I've said before, residency eligibility after only 5 years. You can bring your family. You earn a salary equivalent to your UK colleagues. Great opportunities for promotion and career advancement, which I know is really important to a lot of you. And it's a safe and diverse place to live. We're friendly people, I promise. There's lots of beautiful places to live in the UK. The weather is very different to what most of you will be used to, but we haven't had anyone ever leave, as far as I'm aware, because they're too cold. We do have seasons, so it's not hot and sunny all year round. It's rarely going to get to the temperatures that some of you are used to. I know there's a lot of you who've tuned in from the Philippines today. I know how hot it gets there. I've traveled there a few times myself, and in India and Africa, all sorts of countries where I know that you'll be used to much hotter temperatures that you'll get here. But actually, after a while, it's quite nice to have the seasons, and you will get used to it. Okay, sorry, Trudy. I think I've stolen your slide, so I'll hand back to you to finish off. So thank you for all your attention, guys and girls. It's been lovely to speak to you, and we're here to take any more questions once we get in this session. Thanks, Trudy.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you so much for that. That's been really, really useful. And as you say, there's a lot of information floating around out there on the internet, or people who might charge you fees, whereas the information you've provided today has been clear, useful, and based on first-hand experience. And I think that's really, really key. We have just got a couple of slides here talking about some of the opportunities that we have in the UK. Oh, starting with Why to Choose Drake Medox. So we have been doing this, as Liz said, for a few decades now. We were one of the first, in fact, we were the first agency to start recruiting from the Philippines, identifying the opportunity there and bringing people over. So we've been doing it for a really long time. We've got really good at it. We've experienced most different hiccups that can come along the way, and our team are incredible at solving any problems that come up. So we've successfully deployed over 20,000 healthcare professionals to the UK in that time. We offer free CBT and OSCE training with our partners, ATS Learning Centre. That's for every nurse or midwife who has got a job offer. We offer them that training. The CBT training is a 28-day online portal that they can do at their own pace. And the OSCE training is classroom style interactive learning that you can do in your own country before you come to the UK. That means that you are prepared as well as possible for success when you arrive. As we've already covered off, we offer guidance and support at every step of the way, and we are ethical recruiters. We do genuinely care about you. I know I am warmed. My heart is warmed so often when I hear of the stories of my colleagues who've gone above and beyond to really help individuals in need beyond what they need to have done. So really are in a safe pair of hands with us. And finally, and most importantly, we will never charge you any fees whatsoever. We will give you honest and frank advice at every step of the way, and any costs are to your recruitment is borne by our employers, who are just grateful to have you here, and we will never charge you anything. So I think that's really important to note. If you're speaking to any recruiter or agent who is offering a finder's fee or saying that they can get you something but they're going to charge something, step away. They're not an ethical recruiter, and you're better off coming to us where it's free and excellent. Next slide, please, Jev. So as you can see from this map, we've got opportunities right across the UK. We do have a lot of employers in London, or in the surrounding areas in the south, which is where the majority of the population is. But as you can maybe see from that, we have employers inside London and further afield as well as some up in the north. And the benefits are going to depend on what you're looking for, really. If you're young and you want that vibrancy, then London is one of the greatest cities in the world. If, on the other hand, you're looking for a lower cost of living, somewhere quieter pace of life, then maybe somewhere up north or down on the coast is going to be exactly what you're looking for you and your families to settle in and to build new lives. So we have a lot of opportunities there. We are in a very enviable position here at Drake Medox in that we have an excellent reputation across the UK, so we can pick and choose our employers. So these people we work with are ones that we know that are going to give you the support when you arrive that we're looking for. They're going to help you with your OSCE training, and they're going to give you every chance of success. So yeah, that's an indication there. You can find more information about every single one of those employers on our website, and we'll share links to that in the email we'll send out after this presentation. Next slide, please, Jev. Oh, some lovely pictures of some of our wonderful nurses who we've been welcoming in the last few months. As you can see, we've got people from all over the world in single arrivals, and just lovely pictures of huge smiling faces, and that's just so wonderful to see. That's what gets us out of bed every day. What makes us want to do what we do is to help all those lovely people who are here experiencing a whole new chapter in their lives, and we are ready to help you do the same. Right, I think that's it now. We might be opening up to a Q&A section. Is that right, Jeff? Excellent. So if we can welcome Liz back, and we'll pop some questions on the screen. What's our first question, Liz? Okay, can I arrange accommodation for my family before I arrive in the UK? Liz, that's a great question.
Sure. In case you missed us talking about that particular point before, so it isn't possible legally to arrange accommodation. I say legally because there are some, unscrupulous landlords who may allow that, but I wouldn't suggest that you follow that route because you have no protection. If you are contacting any agents or landlords from overseas, they will always say to you that you need to be in the UK before they can obviously issue a tenancy agreement and sign that, and to check your right to rent eligibility. So it's not possible to take up a rental agreement or sign a rental agreement before you get to the UK. As I said, some people have got around that by renting an Airbnb type apartment or hotel, but that gets very expensive. So you will genuinely have to wait until you get to the UK to arrange the accommodation that you want for your family.
And might as well take advantage of that bit of free accommodation that you're offered when you first get
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely. Just on that point, actually, as I said, all of our client employers do offer a period of accommodation. It's within their commitment to make sure you've got somewhere safe and warm to stay when you arrive. But if, for example, some of the nurses that we work with have family or friends or colleagues in the country already who they have been offered accommodation with, if that applies to you, then that's fine. You can take your own accommodation options on that basis, but you must let us know, obviously, because at the moment, every nurse that is in process for all of our employers are allocated accommodation in advance. So if you don't need accommodation, then please do let us know that as early as you can so that we can feed that back to the client. And also be careful about where that accommodation may be. I mean, presumably the person that you're going to stay with have been in the UK for a while now and will understand where they live in relation to where you might be going to work. But don't put yourself in a position where you've got a really long commute to work, for example. You don't want to be living too far away from your place of work and where you'll be doing your 𝗬𝗏𝗧 study in the beginning.
And you'll be missing
Okay.
out on that opportunity to actually bond with your new cohorts. There are people going through the same experience as you. So sometimes that can be a really great support network that, as you say, come with a new
Absolutely.
family. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you do get into your new family, then obviously the nurses that have been there before you, and when you arrive, our NHS would not survive without overseas trained nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals. So you will certainly not feel out of place, and you will meet lots of fellow nurses and healthcare professionals from your country, from other countries, who will have been in your situation, will have gone through the sort of trials and tribulations of trying to find accommodation, the best places to live, the cheapest places to live, maybe. All of those tips and helpful advice will be key for you when you get to the UK.
Thank you, Liz. Right, Jeff, have we got some other questions there? All right, 𝗱𝗲𝗽𝗂𝗏 is asking, is there an instance where Newcastle included the dependents on their certify maintenance on the MA's COS?
I would
Liz.
have to. Hi, thanks. Hi, Seth. We would have to go back and check on Newcastle's certificate of sponsorship specifically. I can't remember offhand, is the honest answer. Yeah, I can't answer that question. We will check and come back to you afterwards. I wonder why you're asking about Newcastle. Do you know somebody who works there, or is that particularly where you would want to work? But maybe you can add another question in the chat. But we'll find out, Seth, and let you know.
Thank
Any
you
other
for that, Jeff.
questions?
I can see one in the chat here, Liz, that I might just read out because I think it's an unusual question, at least. Somebody has asked, I am single and unmarried. Can I bring my 72-year-old mother and they be my dependent?
Strictly speaking, the answer is no, unfortunately. The dependents, as I've explained earlier, are spouse, partner, or children. So it doesn't include brothers, sisters, parents. Now, however, you may fall into one of those exceptional circumstances where a parent may be allowed if she's solely dependent on you, if you don't have, any other family that could take care of her in your home country. But that's a very specific case and a very specific question. So I'm happy to look into that for you offline. Just drop me, and we'll give you contact details at the end, and you can drop us a line.
Right. Just chatting with the team. Can we bring our dependents on the same deployment date to the UK?
Yes,
So,
again, as we've talked about, yes, legally you can, and we obviously wouldn't stop you, but for all the reasons that I've talked about, we would highly recommend that you don't do that. If it's at all possible to leave your spouse or children at home for a little bit longer, just for a couple of months even, it will make all the difference to you, I promise. But in answer to your question, yes, you are allowed to.
yeah, and of course we can completely sympathise with why people would want to do that. But yeah, as you say, for all the
Absolutely,
reasons
yeah.
given, it just makes life easier for everybody. And of course, your family is staying at home in a place that they know. So if they're able to stay there, then it's better for them, isn't it?
Quite.
In that
Yes.
short
Yeah,
term,
exactly. Exactly.
and you can focus on making their life here in the UK better.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Okay. I think that's it. I know we've got a lot of other questions, but we are running out of time. What
Mhm.
I will say again to everybody is that we will be compiling a list of answers. If you haven't had your answered today, if you haven't had your question answered today, by our team in the chat, or if there are some questions that we think might be of use to everybody, we'll be sending out an email after this with the links, with some of the key points, as well as a link to view the recording online, so that people can have those questions answered. But otherwise, thank you so much, Liz. We've really appreciated you answering what I think a lot of people wanted to know. So
My
yeah,
pleasure.
I hope everyone's found it useful today.
Yes, thanks for everyone. Thanks for attending, everyone. And as Trudy said, we hope we've answered as many questions as we can, but we're always here to answer more if you have them. And good luck with your application. If you are applying, here is the very link.
Exactly. And as we've said before and at the beginning, if you are from what is considered a red list country, unfortunately, we won't be able to help you. But again, when we send out that information, we will give you links and some tips so you'll know where to go to apply. And we've given you a few pointers on making sure your application is successful. And if you are in different parts of the world, we have very I know we've got a lot of people from the Philippines, and we work closely with ASC Global Recruitment, who are absolute experts in not only deploying Filipino healthcare workers, but also managing the POEA and all of the requirements specific to you. And so we've got our team there that will be managing those. And we have other partner agencies across the globe. So you really will be in safe hands and getting expert advice. So thank you very much. And please apply. We look forward to welcoming you as soon as we possibly can to the UK.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
day or evening ahead.
Thank you.